What's up guys, it's Amanda and welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today we're going to be doing another Copic related video in my Copic marker series that still doesn't have a name. But I made a playlist, so if you haven't seen any of the previous videos in this series, you can go check out the playlist and catch up. And just in case my sudden outfit changes haven't fooled you and you're like, Amanda, you're wearing the same makeup and the same choker as the last video, I'm pre-recording a lot of these because, as some of you know, if you watched my life update video, which I will also put in an info card and link down below, I'm moving and I don't want to run the risk of not having a video up for you guys, so I'm recording a lot of these on the same day and just trying to pretend like it's a different day. And if you didn't notice, then this is a different day. And let's get started. So today's video is all about Copic care. Yes, Copics are expensive and they're not an investment to be taken lightly. However, if you take care of them properly, they can last you a long time. Some of the markers in my collection I've had for 8 years. That's crazy, right? But I definitely feel like I've gotten my money's worth and then some, and that's because I take the time and the effort to care properly for my markers. So I'm going to be sharing some of those tips with you guys today, and hopefully you find them helpful. Again, if you have any suggestions for this series, leave a comment down below and thumbs up if you find them helpful. Number 1. Refill your markers. Now I know a lot of you are like letting out a heavy sigh right now, like just another thing to purchase. I know, but hear me out. Not only is refilling your markers better for the life of your marker nib, it's also better for the environment. And squeaking from a dry nib has been known to drive people to homicidal rage. So it's kind of important. If your nib looks something like this, it might be time to bite the bullet and get a refill. Now, I'm sure there's like 101 ways to refill a marker, so I'm just gonna go over how I do it and basically walk you through that process. Now, you can purchase a special tool, which I actually have, but I already packed it up somewhere. It looks like this. If you wanna purchase it, you can. You don't need it, and the method that I show you in this video is not using that, so let's get into my refill method. So number 1, put a paper towel on your desk. You don't wanna risk this getting messy and getting ink everywhere, so this is important because sometimes it does get messy. It didn't get messy in the example clip, but trust me, it's happened. And you also want to remove both of the caps off of your marker on the brush end and the chisel end. Now, step 2, this is where you would use that tool, if you have it, to slightly pull out or even completely remove the chisel end from the marker. I don't really prefer to completely remove it just because I don't really want to like leave it sitting on my desk somewhere just in case there's like hot Cheeto dust or something, you know, so I just think it's a little bit more sanitary to keep it connected to the marker, but it can make the refill process a little bit faster if you just pull it out slightly. But if not, no stress, you can just leave the chisel nib in the way it is and that's totally fine. Number 3, you want to open your ink refill cartridge, and you know, they look like this. Here's a picture, so you know, I'm sure you know if you own one. And if you don't own one, then this tip doesn't really apply to you. Anyway, now you want to hold your marker at a slight angle with the chisel end facing up, and you want to have your ink refill and your chisel nib like about to kiss, you know? And then you're just going to slightly squeeze the ink refill cartridge and just tap it to the chisel nib, releasing about 1 drop of ink at a time, very, very slowly. It's important to do this slowly because the ink has to travel down through the barrel and onto the other side of the marker. And if you do this too fast, you can risk overfilling your marker and having ink dripping down out the other side. Hence why we put a paper towel down, but still it's not something that you want to push, so go slow. I tend to add about 20 drops at a time, but it's going to vary depending on how dry your marker is. I prefer my markers pretty juicy, so I tend to refill them a little bit more frequently, but with less ink each time. So that's just my personal preference. And you'll know that your marker is done refilling because the brush nib will look juicy and wet almost. You don't want it to be too wet to the point where ink is dripping out of it, but it will look sort of shiny, and that's when you know that you're done refilling it. Tip number 2 is to keep your markers clean, and this includes the plastic part under the nib, the barrel itself, and most importantly, inside the marker cap. You'll know if you're one of those artists that frequently gets ink stains on like the inside of their fingers, I know I do, that your markers need cleaning. And you would be surprised how dirty those caps get. So usually what I do is I just get a little bit of rubbing alcohol and some Q-tips and paper towels and various things like that to sort of wipe down the marker and make sure that there's no ink kind of stained in places where it shouldn't be, especially in the caps. You guys, oh my gosh, when I was cleaning the marker cap in the demo, it was so dirty. No wonder that marker's always getting all over my hands. The cap is like overflowed with ink. And that can be another reason if you overfill your markers, the excess ink goes into the cap and then ends up on your finger, and then people think you're like stabbing people in your free time. You don't want to go there. No fun. So make sure that you're keeping your markers clean. It's really, really important to do this. You know, every couple of months, go through all your markers and clean them. I know it's a lot of time and a lot of effort, but trust me, it makes a difference. Now, occasionally your nibs will get clogged. What this means is that the ink in it is become sort of crystallized and has made it harder for the ink to flow through the marker evenly. What you do in a situation like this, or at least what I do, is I dip the nib in some rubbing alcohol for a few seconds and then rub it out on a piece of scrap paper. This usually clears it up. Sometimes you have to do it multiple times, but I find that this particularly happens with my darker Copic markers, and this has helped me a lot to improve the ink flow. And this may be also a reason that I don't have to replace my nibs that often. Just a thought. I'm no scientist, but that's my theory. Tip number 3, store your markers horizontally. Now, I know this is kind of like counterintuitive because when you buy markers, they come stored vertically, but I prefer to store my markers horizontally, and this is less of a care tip and just more of a convenience tip, because when you store them horizontally, the ink is more evenly distributed and you're less likely to get leaks or sudden drips, and those can be detrimental to your artwork if you're not prepared for them. So I just prefer to store mine horizontally. I just think it's easier. It also makes them easier to find and easier to grab. And if you can't afford a Copic storage case like the one I bought, you can definitely build your own. I will link down below a couple of my favorite build your own Copic storage case videos, because there's tons here on YouTube. There's also tons of Copic storage cases available at different price ranges. I'll leave mine linked down below, and I'll also link a couple of others that I've used in the past and have liked. You also want to make sure you're storing your Copic markers in a cool, dry place. You definitely don't want to have them sitting in like direct sunlight, because that can make the ink evaporate faster and just shorten the overall shelf life of your markers. The next care tip that I have is sort of something to think about when you're doing multimedia pieces, and that is not to layer your markers over certain materials. So for example, certain brands of colored pencils like the Prismacolor Premier pencils are very buttery and waxy, and sometimes if you color over waxy colored pencils with your Copic markers, they'll leave sort of a waxy residue on the marker and make it more difficult for ink to flow through. So that could result in you having to replace your nibs more often or having to clean them out with rubbing alcohol more occasionally. So that's just something to think about. Same thing with graphite and certain paints. They can smudge and leave residue on the nibs, and that can just sort of complicate things. I didn't demo this just because obviously I don't want to like mess with my markers. They're my babies. So I'm just kind of like forewarning you guys about this one, but like just trust. Okay, just trust. And tip number 5, this is the last care tip that I have, but that is to use the right paper. Now, this is less of a care tip and just more of a getting the most out of your markers that you can kind of tip, because if you use the wrong paper, your markers aren't going to perform properly, and that can lead you to believe that there's something wrong with the marker, when in reality it's actually the paper. So Copic markers, being the finicky, bougie marker that they are kind of like a Goldilocks thing, you know? The paper can't be too thick because the ink will absorb and dry too quickly and you won't be able to blend, plus you'll go through your marker ink like crazy. So I don't recommend paper like watercolor paper because that's usually too thick and too textured. At the same time, the paper can't be too thin because the ink's not going to dry fast enough and can usually bleed on the paper, bleed through the paper onto your desk, and it's not really going to blend properly either. So can't really be too thin, can't be too thick, it has to be just right. And I will link down below a couple of my favorite papers that I like to use with markers. Again, it's going to kind of be personal preference, but these are just some of the ones that I found and liked for various reasons. So the description bar is going to be poppin' with lots of exciting links and information. I'm assuming that those of you watching these videos are here for the information, so I'm giving it to you. All of the resources, all of my tools, and any information that I can offer you is going to be in the description bar down below. Hopefully you don't mind opening that and digging through there. But trust me, it will be worth it. So that is it for today's video. Hopefully you guys liked it. If you did, give it a thumbs up and check out the other videos in this series. And without further ado, I'm going to go have a snack because I recorded 3 consecutive videos today and I'm tired. So I will see you guys Friday with my Artsy Fartsy Friday video for the week. Bye guys.